Well, good evening, everyone. I am LaShonda Woods-Roberts, Equal Justice Works Fellow at Georgia Appleseed, and I want to welcome you to the Georgia Appleseed and Truancy Intervention Project's Reopening School and Reengaging Student Community Town Hall. This is our first event of our school reengagement series, and we hope you will join us for our next two events. On July 30th, we will host our Advocating for Georgia's Children, Alternatives to Exclusionary School Discipline event from 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. and our follow-up town hall event where we hope you'll join us again, Deepening Engagement, Keeping Kids in School During a Pandemic on September 10th from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Please visit www.gaappleseed.org to learn more about our upcoming events, or you can visit our Facebook page as well. So we will now hear from Georgia Appleseed's Legal and Policy Director, Caroline Durham, and the Truancy Intervention Project's Deputy Director, Sarah Babcock, who will share a few words before we hear from our panelists tonight.
Hey, good afternoon, good evening. We are so grateful to have you here. The work of having our children thrive in schools, the experts that we have on this panel today are going to tell you all about it. We're glad to have you. We're excited to team up with TIP and all of the organizations that are supporting us here.
Hi, everyone. Excuse me. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Babcock. I'm the Deputy Director of the Truancy Intervention Project, and we are thrilled to have partnered with Georgia Appleseed to present this important town hall on how we all can support children and schools as school prepares to restart in whatever form that will be this fall. And we are tremendously grateful to all of our panelists for taking time tonight to talk with all of you. I know that they are going to be great resources for all of you in answering the questions that you're having as we prepare to restart our school year. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Caroline and Sarah. And in the spirit of school, in alphabetical order, we'll hear from each of our panelists as they introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their organization and the work that they do. So we're going to start with Maribel Bell from Fulton County.
Hello, everyone. My name is Maribel Bell. I am the Director of Student Discipline, Prevention, and Intervention at Fulton County Schools. I'm so happy to be here with you all today and speak to kids and what we're trying to get together for them. And of course, I love my partnership with Georgia Appleseed.
And we love our partnership with Fulton, so thank you, Maribel. And we'll hear from Ray Bettendorf now. You're on mute, Ray.
Sorry about that. Good evening. Happy to be here. My name is Ray Bettendorf. I'm an attorney and education advocate. I've had my own law firm for the last 2 years here. But prior to that, I was an educator and administrator with DeKalb County Schools. For the last 2 school seasons or school years, I've been working with the Truancy Intervention Project. And my role there is to help defend students who have alleged truancy issues. And I also support other volunteer attorneys in that respect. My work with truancy intervention starts out in the courtroom, but for myself and other volunteers, it often goes outside of the courtroom into the schools and into the communities, supporting students and parents throughout the education process. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you, Ray. Thank you. Now we're going to go to Kamala Buchanan.
Hello, thank you. My name is Kamala Buchanan. I'm an education law attorney with Georgia Legal Services Program, which is a nonprofit that represents low-income Georgians outside of the metro Atlanta area with their civil legal needs. That includes education, and I'm a member of the education team where we work on school discipline and special education issues, and have also litigated some enrollment and civil rights issues. As a member of that team, I do all of those things, and I also have a postgraduate fellowship that focuses on race equity and community outreach to communities where GLSP has not been able to reach those communities. So I'm really happy to be here and very, very grateful to Appleseed and the Truancy Intervention Project.
Thank you so much, Kamala. Now we'll hear from Jewel Gooding.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joel Gooding. I am the Executive Director for Mental Health America of Georgia. We are an education outreach and advocacy organization. We provide across the state to all Georgians in regards to mental health awareness, education. We do advocacy for vulnerable population, including those who are at risk for behavioral health challenges. We serve the entire lifespan, so from pediatric to geriatric, we provide education and advocacy and ongoing outreach as we continue to support communities overall. We reduce the rates of suicide across the state. Right now, it's the 11th leading cause of death. And we also really work hard to eliminate the stigma associated with mental illness and mental health in general, and recognizing the importance of our mental well-being. And right now is one of the most pivotal times in our lives that our mental health takes priority, so that we are better able to manage the crisis that we are experiencing.
Thank you for that, Jill. Mental health is so important in this process, especially. Now we'll hear from Katie Landis.
Hi, I'm Katie Landis. I'm the director of the Georgia Statewide After School Network. We are a policy and advocacy organization working on both after school and summer learning issues across the state. And we also work with after school and summer learning programs across Georgia, providing them resources and professional development to help them continue to improve the quality of the programming they offer to youth and families.
Thank you so much, Katie. So before we get started, we want to encourage all of you to use the question and answer tool or feature at the bottom of your screen. And if you are looking from Facebook, from one of many of our partner sites, or Truancy Intervention Projects page, or Georgia Appleseed's page, please engage. We have someone there to send the questions to us, so feel free to share in that place as well. And those questions will get over to us here, and we will respond to the best of our ability. So to get this conversation started tonight, I wanted to ask one very important question to each of the panelists. What do you consider to be the greatest challenge regarding schools reopening? And again, in the spirit of school, we'll start with the alphabetical order. So Maribel, what do you foresee as the greatest challenge as we prepare to reopen and re-engage kids?
Yeah, I'm going to say, just because this is not anything that we've ever experienced before, at least as adults, we have some understanding of certain things. As students, they don't. So for me, it's just the safety and security of all of our students and staff, and being able to provide an education and doing it in a way that we're protecting all of our students and our staff. So for me, it would just be safety and health.
Thank you so much, Ray.
Yeah, so, when thinking about this question, I had all sorts of things that popped into my mind, with regard to social distancing in the classroom, on the bus. And while I think those are going to be definitely challenging issues for schools to face, I thought I should probably just reach out to administrators and get their perspective. And the overwhelming thread that I received, with the comments and the feedback that I got, there's this concern about parent engagement, because this is such a huge shift in from what, traditional school and everything that goes on. Parent engagement is going to be vital for this to go well, especially when we think of the younger children. It's good that parents are going to have to lead the way. They're going to have to do things that are outside of their comfort zone. And so I believe that, making sure that the parents are provided resources so that they can be actively engaged, and getting that engagement is one of the largest challenges that we face during this time right now.
Thank you for that, Ray. Kamala?
Yeah, I think from my vantage point as a civil legal aid attorney, I imagine that the greatest challenge, that equity issues will present the greatest challenge. We know that low-income Black and Brown students are disciplined at higher rates and lack access to things like the internet or private tutors or extracurriculars that can provide a great amount of sort of support and stability during this time. And at the same time, we know that these are the exact communities that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. So I think we can expect to see these inequities sort of compound one another as schools reopen, and students will return who have been impacted by the trauma of the pandemic, and also other school-based inequities, and are also the same students who are more likely to be subject to exclusionary discipline. So I think preventing this pandemic from widening the achievement gap and exacerbating those already existing disparities will be a really huge challenge. But I've also seen a lot of really innovative work being done, and I'm very hopeful that this is an opportunity to shine some light on the reasons for those inequities and come up with more sort of creative, restorative solutions.
Thank you, Kamala, and we absolutely share in all of those challenges that you all are considering, and the equity piece is so important right now as we move forward. Jewel?
Well, I'm an advocate, right? So it's definitely mental health. You know, my concern for mental health for students, mental health for parents, mental health for administrators, school leaders. It's not an envious job whatsoever right now. Our school administration staff is really getting a hard hit in regards to the responses. And the reality is there are no good answers. There are no good decisions at the moment. We can recognize the challenges as is associated with parent engagement. How are parents going to be able to be there? You know, literacy understanding for our parental sites and being able to be there. I struggle myself for sixth grade, so I'm a little concerned about my sixth grader and the performance that he's looking for and being new to middle school, right? So it's a lot of those challenges that I worry about, that social emotional health across the board, because I think that's the one thing that's not tangible. You can't really see it all the time, but it's felt so, and it have more of a long-term impact in all of the work that we do. But I agree with all of my panelists here. All of those are some very huge challenges we face.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jewel. Katie?
Benefit of going last is I can start by just saying ditto to everything that everyone else said. But then I do want to just really kind of pick up with what Kamala was talking about. And then as we're seeing more and more districts come out with virtual and hybrid models that they're considering or that they are in fact going with, and we're also in a space where more and more parents are going back to in-person work. A big piece here is going to be making sure that young people who need a safe space to go and simply just even connect to their distance learning, whether it's they need a safe space because their parents aren't home, they're at work, or it's that they're unable to connect to distance learning effectively at home, making sure that those spaces are available to young people who need them is going to be a big thing, because distance learning is not available to everyone for a variety of reasons at home.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone. So I have the next question, and these are some initial questions that LaShonda and I had, and then we will turn to the questions that folks gave when they registered for the panel for this webinar. And after we've gone through some of those, we'll make sure to get to the questions that folks are typing in the Q&A. So if you're putting a question in the Q&A or on Facebook, don't worry, we will make sure that we get to it. And so I'll say I'm going to go in reverse alphabetical order. So to tee up Katie, sorry to put you on the spot right away. But the next question we wanted to pose to everyone is, how is your organization or agency working to support families and schools and providers and other members of our community as we prepare for schools to reopen, again, recognizing that that reopening is virtual or in person or some combination?
Well,
so go to you first, Katie. Yeah,
back up where I left off is those in-person spaces. At the After School Network, a lot of the work that we're doing right now is really working to support after-school programs and thinking about how they can best serve the young people, families, and communities that they work with, whether that is by shifting their model to provide in-person programming for the full school day, if they're in a community where schools are going back virtual, or if that's connecting virtually. We are providing tools to help facilitate partnerships between these community-based programs and the K-12 community, as well as communities and city leadership themselves. But I do want to talk a second about not just what we're doing, but really the after-school providers themselves and those summer learning providers. They have been doing tremendous work for the last 4 or 5 months. So many of them flipped what they have been doing, what is their normal model, in a matter of, if not a week, a matter of a couple days, to fundamentally change the way they were serving communities. And I think one thing that's been really great about this field and this time is it's really shown how truly innovative they can be and how adaptable they are. You've seen programming switch from, some programs as early as a week after school closures, shifting to opening to in-person programming, full day in-person programming for the children of hospital workers. You have other programs who have taken the hands-on, super engaging, relationship building work that they do in person into the virtual space, where that has taken shape as like virtual well checks that they're doing really regularly with young people. And quite honestly, sometimes it is the young people that are difficult to reach or that are not connecting to the distance learning platforms in the spring. We've also seen these programs take a tremendous role in meal delivery. So knowing that a lot of these same young people and families needing access to those meals, schools did a tremendous job, but these partners were a good partner in that. You are hearing my child care in the background. But then also in the summer, they specifically did a really big job about providing summer meals this summer as well. It is noisy here. They've done so much more than that, but I will simply pass this off to someone else.
Thanks, Katie. Jewel, do you want to talk about what y'all are doing?
Absolutely. So a lot of the education is pivotal. So in Vietnam, in response to COVID, it's really about providing that wellness and understanding self-care, recognizing the challenges of a parent as a caregiver. So we are doing a lot of evidence or science or science-informed research-based education in regards to mental well-being techniques, strategies, looking at ways to engage families, but also the professionals, right? The administrators. This is not just a school issue. This isn't just a parent issue or a teacher issue. This is a community issue. So really helping folks to recognize the impact, however, platform, whether it's in person, digital, that we're all going to be facing some challenges, and a lot of what's already been highlighted, particularly when we talk about and we talk about our Black and our Brown communities and the impact that's going to have on them. So we do provide that level of education. It's also about validation. A lot of times parents are faced with what you're not doing, that we forget that this is just as hard for them, and they want to be just as supportive. So we do provide that ongoing validation, that ongoing support, resources that could be available to you, and then teaching them how to utilize it, right? Because it's not just giving them the information, but what can you do differently? So looking at ways to manage or balance that, the work-life balance where you're teleworking, that mom guilt is really big right now with COVID-19. And am I doing enough, and or am I not, So it's those constant battles. So we really try to do that validation, then providing that education, and then helping parents to implement that. So providing that across the board, because I know we think about professionals, but professionals are parents too, right? Teachers are parents too, and how do they manage those different nuances? So those are the primary challenges, and really trying to integrate that overall education. So we'll be doing series on community training as well as family training. We have our Kids on the Block program, which is a puppetry arts program to connect with students between the ages of about 3 to 12 years old, where they can engage with a puppet. And we're going to be doing what we call Reading with Frank and Lori. Going to have a literacy 30 minutes, right? Just to give the break to parents. Someone else is reading to your child, and that's one other break that we can kind of step back. And we focus on, again, across the board, in supporting the government of our populations. But right now, this really is on children and their families, and supporting the parents, because the children aren't on their own, so are we helping mom and dad to manage their anxiety so that anxiety doesn't come from that child? Are we validating parents where they are so that guilt doesn't kick in? And then when we start looking at those other risk factors, then you start seeing things like substance abuse, isolation, suicide thoughts and behaviors, or even times of when you're just completely disconnected and you're not bonded. So making sure that we have a strong focus on the parents and those who are caring for our young people, but then also helping our young people. So we do provide youth training as well too, to help their own emotions, to help them understand how they are feeling, to process their feelings, to normalize their feelings, and to look at radical acceptance. You know, one of the harder things, I have a teenager and his whole thing is, you know, well, why do I have to be like, you know, everybody else? I'm okay, right? Because that's the messages that they're hearing. But it's really educating them on, you know, it's not just about you, but let's be a little bit more compassionate and thinking about others and what is the impact of your choices and how that can impact others. So helping teens to understand that, and even helping young parents or parents of young children to learn how to explain that to their children as well too. So looking at the gamut of it, providing education at those different areas and being able to discuss it from a perspective where there is no judgment, no shame. Right now, there are some very strong opinions about everything that's happening, and people feel compelled to share all of those strong opinions. And most times it leads to mean, reckless comments that's unnecessary. We're all struggling through this storm. We may be in different boats, but this is all the same storm that we're trying to paddle ourselves through. So being able to show that level of compassion, understanding that radical acceptance, and really focusing on their mental health so that other areas of their life is also focused.
Thanks,
And then
Jewel.
advocacy. I'm so sorry.
No.
We're advocating the whole way, all day, talking, trying to figure out the best approach, really working with our providers, our state leaders as they're developing guidance, and making sure that our school leaders have access to that as well too. So that as well too.
Great, thanks, Jewel. Kamala, do you want to talk a little bit about what GLSP is doing?
Sure, although it's hard to follow incredible work that Jewel and Katie are doing, but I'll try. GLSP joined a number of other sort of student advocacy organizations to send a letter to the Georgia Department of Education recently, within the past few weeks. The letter emphasized the need for statewide guidance for school districts with respect specifically to students with special needs and school discipline. So we hope to continue to do advocacy like that to push for some kind of guidance. We're also hosting a two-part series on school discipline and special education at some point in August and September. Stay tuned, date TBD, but with a focus on race equity and pandemic issues. And also, as schools do reopen, we will continue to represent individual students and their families, and hope to be able to sort of engage with the communities we serve to be able to be responsive to community need, recognizing that this is an unprecedented situation and we may need to adjust how we advocate for our clients. But with that work, we hope to be able to work collaboratively with school districts and other advocates for children to make sure that this really hard moment can be used as an opportunity to advocate for alternatives to exclusionary discipline and zero tolerance discipline, and turn more to restorative responses to behavior that's really shaped by the trauma of this moment.
Great. Ray, do you want to go next?
Sure. So the Truancy Intervention Project will continue to assist students and parents outside of the courtroom. So many of the students that come through the Truancy Intervention Project for truancy issues, when you look into the background and you start to get into what's going on, there may be special education issues, there may be discipline issues that are occurring at the school. So the TIP volunteers will continue to advocate for those students outside of the courtroom. They'll be attending IEP meetings, 504 meetings, discipline hearings. These things will still continue. They may change in form, kind of like how the students will be attending virtually. So these hearings will likely be virtual. I had the opportunity to participate in some of those last year virtually, and quite honestly, they went very well. I didn't see much of a drop off in terms of delivering services, although it can be hit and miss. But I did find that, you know, these mandatory meetings were still occurring. The TIP volunteers will be there continuing to do that work, as well as assisting outside of the community. A lot of the tip volunteers end up having to do things like helping the families fill out paperwork to secure insurance, health insurance, looking for alternatives to traditional school settings. So we'll continue to do that. And then the Truancy Intervention Project is also sharing all of you guys' information as well, your friends and partners of the Truancy Intervention Project. So they're sharing your information with the people that we encounter so that they can get resources from you all as well. And so, we're just sharing all the information we have, continuing to advocate for the students. If they need food, if they need Wi-Fi connection, Truancy Intervention Project is making attempts to make sure that they can secure those resources. So we'll be doing that as well.
Great, thank you. And last but definitely not least, Maribel, if you want to talk a little bit about what Fulton County schools are doing. Oh, we need you to unmute yourself.
Yeah. So, as we speak, there's a board meeting going on right now where a lot of the information that parents have needed and wanted to know are being shared tonight. So I'm excited about that. But again, all these are decisions. It's not been easy. We've been working tirelessly. I'm so proud to work for a district where students are our top most priority. When I tell you the leadership and everybody that's just been rolling up sleeves to try and figure this out, whether we went back face to face, and of course we want to see our kids, we want them back in school, and that would be ideal. That's not what we're seeing right now, and unfortunately we need to make sure that our students and staff are safe, and so we are going virtual. And I'm so proud of our district. We have touched on, I think, everything that we think we could possibly touch on, especially when it comes to barriers and equity, and trying to find ways to make sure that every student is going to get an education virtually as best as we can. We have lots of resources. We have restart lessons that are going to take social emotional lessons that will be a part of the day as soon as we get back, because we know kids have been traumatized and are coming back to school and needing that support. We have all sorts of tips and tricks and all sorts of things to help our students and our families to stay engaged. We have a process and protocol for disengaged students. So day one, kids who we saw were disengaged from the beginning, those are our first roundabout kids that we're going to make sure that they have everything that we need. So we're calling that locate and assess them. We're going to make sure we get connected with them, get them whatever it is that they need to make sure that they're able to take advantage of the virtual setting and hopefully get us back face to face. So there are lots of SEL lessons that are going to take place. We've continued with our mental health professionals doing telehealth for our families still. That is not leaving. It just looks a little different. We've trying to be really proactive even with discipline by sending out a parent letter to all parents, have been very clear that just because we're virtual, the code of conduct does still exist. There are expectations that we have, and we want them to have a great and safe learning environment. And so we are really pushing our PBIS framework to help kids to be able to do that. So we've assisted every single school with figuring out what distant learning and what the expectations are for them in the distant learning through positive behavior intervention supports. And we are going to acknowledge our students, even virtually. They will get acknowledged for doing everything we need them to do. Hotlines, Spanish-speaking parents, we have translators that are having difficulty, let's say, with their technology. We have Spanish-speaking people and other translators available to support those families and kids to troubleshoot whatever they need to do. For our younger kids that really just can't access virtual learning, we have packets and instructional packets, and there's going to be a mechanism to keep track of those kids. And really, I am so proud to be a Fulton employee right now. When I tell you that they're just thinking of everything, trying to do everything, collaborating with everybody to really try and make this work and do it well, and making sure that we are looking out for all kids and making sure that we are able to provide special ed services in a way that we can in the virtual setting. And so I'm a proud Fultonite right now. And I think It's not easy. It's not easy, but I'll tell you, I'm super proud of all the resources and supports that are ready to go for our kiddos on day one. And so, yeah, so that's where we're at.
Great, thank you.
And Maribel, I'm just going to stay with you for a little while because we know the task at hand when it comes to preparation, and some schools are still trying to decide whether or not they're bringing kids into the building. I know you all are not taking it for granted. And when school starts virtually, you still have to plan for in-person school at some point to begin again.
That plan is there, ready to go.
Ready to go.
Yes.
So can you speak to some of the procedures and precautions in place safety-wise for for students and parents, and what you all are doing to make sure when they are back, how are they going to be protected? Could you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, so I'm a parent. I have 4 kids, and I'm in my kids go to a different school district than I work for. One of the things that I feel that Fulton did a really good job about was, even though we didn't have the answers, we always had open communication. There was always something going out. I think we were pretty progressive with that. Just even though we didn't know it, just keeping everybody updated. And so we're following CDC guidelines, all of those measures. If you go into one of our schools right now or into our administrative building, there is signage everywhere. There are safety precautions put in place, like let's say, there's hand sanitizer everywhere. There's stickers on the floor of where you can walk, who can be in what room, how many people can be there. The hand dryers have been shut down and covered. The water coolers are shut down and covered. So, we're really taking all of what the CDC guidelines are giving us and really trying to make that happen at the school building level. So, yeah, so lots of signage, lots of communication, lots of information on practicing to wear your mask before we get to school when we thought we were coming back face to face, or giving parents resources on how to set up your home for appropriate learning, on the virtual side. But as far as safety considerations, it's, the mask, social distancing, all of the CDC guidelines, we're making sure that we follow.
Thank you, Maribel. And we want to take the time to acknowledge that the Georgia Department of Education and the RESAs throughout the state are ready to send out millions of supplies to the different districts. So I just wanted to make sure I at least acknowledge that the Department of Education in Georgia is working extremely hard to support districts and schools as they prepare for the reopening.
And I'll share, lots of PPE has been ordered, special face masks for our kiddos that need to see a face, for language, and so all sorts of things. All of that stuff has been ordered and ready to support students. So yeah, we're doing the best that we can, and I think we're doing a great job.
So our next question is probably for Jewel and maybe Maribel as well. What can parents or guardians do now to help prepare students for a return to school, whether that return is in person or virtual? And so, for example, should parents and guardians be working with children, like, talking about like how to wear a mask at home and getting ready to see their teachers in masks? Or is there anything else that parents and guardians can be doing now to help their kids prepare for this transition?
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say, yeah, all of that preparing, knowing how to wear a mask the right way, knowing how to wash your hands the right way, practicing all those things, helping them to understand what socially distancing is, taking away the idea that, so some of these students may see teachers with masks on, just kind of talking through those things, having those conversations, checking in with them every day. Just to even have a conversation at the end of their school day to say, hey, how was today? How was virtual learning today if we went back virtually? But certainly talking, being available, paying attention to those signs and symptoms of mental health for your student is critical.
And I would just to add in there, our language is very important. Now, regardless of how you feel about the situation, how leadership is handling, however your school district may be handling something, it's important that those maybe negative views are not pushed onto the student. We want them to be comfortable in their school setting. So just being mindful of if we're complaining about certain things, that we're keeping our kids away from those level of complaints, and because they absorb that, right? And it's also very important to recognize the developmentally appropriateness of what to do at what level in working with your child, right? So of course, the younger children, conversation very different. You don't want to do too much of the explaining, but just kind of the basic things and helping them to normalize it. You know, now is a time that a lot of the stores are requiring to wear masks. So let's make a trip of it, right? So let's go to our grocery store and let's practice wearing our mask. And what do we do with our hands? And how can we stay, you know, a certain level, a length apart if we're doing that in-person instruction? And then with our back to school or our virtual or distance learning, some ways you can practice with younger children is doing that with family members. Let's get on a Zoom call with our parents, and you know, so we can practice in that. And how do we press the mute button, right? And making sure that, you know, how do you put up your signals, and how do you make sure that you have on clothes when you're walking around, right? So, you know, reminding them of those boundaries and helping to really implement a structure. And I know a structure can be hard depending on where we are and what you're able to do. And it's also overwhelming, particularly because we have gotten, at least for parents, have gotten used to our teacher consultants, I like to call them. These are our other consultants in life that we have been able to rely on to help implement that level of structure if you are not accustomed of doing in-home learning. And how would you do it if you are working, or what would that look like? For another instance, I think it's important for parents to recognize if you have a child with a mental disability or a delay, intellectual developmental disability, identifying what other resources and supports you can obtain from your school system. I am a parent of a child with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. There is a certain level of instruction and structure that I have to provide for him. So one of the really important things that I encourage parents to do, learn your child. I know we think we know them, but when you're trying to know them and structure, it's a little bit different, right? Because we didn't have to do that on a regular basis. I've had to learn what is best suited for my son. I had to learn, you know, how I can really regulate his day. We had to do a calendar schedule every single day. We went through all of the objectives that was laid out, and we identified what is some help, where are some areas do we need some help. I even helped him to utilize his siblings when he needed some additional support. So it's really helping them to understand your child, learning, you know, what are some of their fears, right, associated with social distancing. I have a student who is going to be in 4 AP classes, and he's really anxious about doing AP in a distance learning atmosphere. Mom's also, you know, very anxious because I don't know AP physics, guys. I never had to take it, don't want to. So it's one of those things. How do you really prep for that? So I really appreciate Maribel for speaking on some of the different resources that Fulton County has implemented. How do you set up your home? I encourage you to really invest in some of those websites, and I'm pretty sure that LaShonda is going to put in the chat the sites where there is just a multitude of resources that the Department of Education has set up. But this is the one time that I encourage parents, reach out. Email your teachers, email your administrators, let them know what your concerns are now, and don't feel ashamed if you feel like you can't do something. We are all struggling with this, guys. I don't know new math, right? So it's one of those times that our kids are probably going to be carrying the one after the end of all. How can we ensure that we are okay as caregivers, that we are advocating for ourselves, family? So really thinking and taking this time to understand that process and really managing our worry. So all of these fears that we're having, taking time to write it out, to develop a plan around it, and then can and cannot change. Things that you can solve, we can go ahead and develop a plan around it. And things that we don't have much control over, being okay with accepting it as it is.
I just want to add, like, it's really critical to try and keep as much structure for our students as you can. Mimic a schedule, practice a schedule, what it would look like for the new school day for them. You know, they're going to be coming off of summer and haven't really not have had much probably structure or a schedule. And you know, when this all happened, we just went into go mode, and it was what it was. But this is now 2.0. We've had some time to practice. Some of our teachers have had extra training and extra support on how to be a better teacher virtually and how to manage that, how to manage behaviors in a virtual setting. Because trust me, there are behaviors still happening, even though they're not face to face, but there are things happening. But so you know, just to kind of piggyback off of what Jules said, and just to kind of add, like, the more that you can practice and have those conversations and practice the structure of what a day will look like, that's an awesome start, you know. And do know your kids and try and really fully understand their emotions and what they might be going through. And then lastly, I'm just gonna say this again, there are lots of resources out there. The school district has tons of resources. We have all of our social workers are ready to go, counselors ready to go, mental health providers ready to go. So as a family, you know, and I'm not perfect either, right? So, and we're all going through this. I just need to know that it's okay for me to reach out. There is help there. There's resources there. There isn't a lack of that. That's happening, and we just need to connect you. So it's parents and families, just don't be scared to ask, because there's stuff and we can connect you.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you both.
Thanks so much. So to the extent that you can answer this question, and this is open to everyone, what platforms or instruction methods are districts planning on using for your own children? Are you aware of what platforms will be used? I know that there are some districts when we closed schools in March that were able to use maybe Google Classrooms or Edmodo, but there were other schools and districts where it was kind of chaotic and they had multiple and sometimes dozens of different platforms for any given child. So what platforms are you all aware of that are going to be used to make this process smoother this time around?
Yeah, so what we found was that when we were in go mode and everybody was going into virtual and we were doing remote learning, we were trying to utilize the things that we have, and we have access to lots of platforms and lots of things. But what we realized was one of the things that parents shared was that it was just too many different platforms and too many different things to go. And so our district uses Teams. And so we've made a commitment to do that for our parents, to keep everything in one single place, one single way. And so that's what we're doing. So we use Microsoft Teams. And certainly some of the other platforms that some of the other platforms that we were using, like iReady and some of those other things, Imagine Learning, some of those things that support our students of, you know, our ELL students and our literacy programs. Some of those things that the kids already used to will still have access to those. But one of the big things that we did hear from parents was that too many going too many different places. It was hard to keep up with, especially if you had kids from different levels, and they didn't really know necessarily how to navigate those things either. And so our district heard that and made a decision to just stick to Microsoft Teams and build our teachers' comfort level, support level, and their ability to use that platform in a way that they can do instruction virtually. So yeah, so that's how we're doing it over in Fulton.
Thank you so much, Maribel.
And
So,
so as a parent, I'm in Gwinnett County. So we recently just shifted to 100% virtual. And I think they were heavily relying on being able to do dual. So I'm not sure what the rollout plans are right now. I know last year we did use the Google Classroom as well as the Zoom platform. And I know that there were some challenges, you know, associated with Zoom and that ongoing on how to utilize that. You know, one thing about the technology, particularly your children, is that they'll get it, right? So the concern is not that they won't be able to manipulate it or to be able to understand it. It's the connectivity piece of it, you know, looking at the broadband and what is accessible to certain homes. Because even in some of the urban homes, you still are going to have challenges with broadband connectivity. So I think they are working on it. I did receive a call the other day just to ask me where we in regards to internet as well as to devices. So I appreciated that call, just to kind of get some insight on, what's available in your home. What resources do you have available? Interesting enough, though, I have not had one for my high school students, so I'm not sure how they are going to maneuver that. So I do think, Gwinnett is, we're working. That's kind of how Gwinnett does. We kind of work, and then they'll unveil something for us. So hopefully that will come sooner than later, so that we can reduce anxiety among parents so they could prepare for it.
I can speak to DeKalb County. I have a rising senior in DeKalb County, and so I've been really in tune in what their reopening is going to look like and everything. So from researching that, they plan to use the Verge platform, which is a platform that DeKalb County has had for a while. But there were issues, I think, as you all have kind of touched on, in terms of teachers' comfortableness with that and students being able to use it. They also plan to utilize or allow them to use Microsoft Teams. And those seem to be the two platforms that they are favoring. But when you read their onward and upward strategy, which is a pretty good read if you're into this stuff, it's pretty transparent. They give all the results of the recent polls that they have done on parents, but they also say in there that they're going to go with the flexible model. So while they're encouraging their teachers to use Verge and Microsoft Teams, they're allowing them to use Zoom, Skype, and other things that they may be comfortable with in an effort to make sure that it occurs. From last year, from our experience, we did have a few teachers that were not very comfortable, and I think it did show up when you didn't see them having classes very often. So I think this flexibility may help in that regard, but they are doing more professional learning to try to shore up that comfortableness with teachers. They're also providing learning experiences for parents and students. They're completing modules that they're going to put out and give access to the parents and students to learn how to access and manipulate the different platforms. So I like where they're going with the flexibility there, as long as we shore it up with the modules and the opportunities for parents, teachers, and students to learn these different platforms.
One of the things I want to touch on that all of the panelists have said is be sure to reach out to your schools or your school districts. We found out right away when the schoolhouses closed and distance learning became the norm, that there were people who didn't have access to Wi-Fi, that didn't have devices. If you reach out to your school districts and let them know, there are resources there. And if you find that you're not getting the answers you want, there are ways to get those as well. The Department of Education website actually has a lot of resources too, but please be sure to let folks know so that your children can have what they need.
So I think our next question is probably initially directed towards Katie, someone wanted to know about sort of what was the effectiveness of virtual school for pre-K children, and what can parents of young children do to support their children's learning in a virtual environment, which, for pre-K and younger, you could see that might be difficult, and if there are any resources available to parents of those kids.
So in terms of the effectiveness, I really, can't speak to that one, and I would leave that to our early learning partners, particularly those at the Department of Early Care and Learning. And on that, to that third part of that question, the resources, DeKalb, if you haven't checked out their website, if you're looking for resources for your youngest learners while at home, they have tremendous resources. Really early on in the spring, they launched, I might be saying the wrong name, but Pre-K at Home. And then they also had a portal for infant toddlers and a lot of resources. I can tell you as a partner of theirs, I think they're great, but also as a parent. I'm a parent of 2 small children, so that young category. And we use some of their, the lessons or just real simple things that they had for the pre-K at home. That was really easy. Some of them were longer tips, and some of them were just a real quick idea that you could use that moment, and just a new way of thinking about how you can engage these young learners. You can hear my rising pre-K student in the back. And so in terms of, the actual tips and things that parents can do, I'm actually not going to speak from my professional lens right now, but I previously was a kindergarten teacher. So I do have that hat that has been put away for a while, but then again, I have the rising pre-K student at home. I think just 3 things I would want to mention there is continue to not just forget about the importance of play for the youngest learners and how they learn. It doesn't have to be that, yes, you need structure and yes, you need routine. Kids thrive on that, but the learning part doesn't have to be that structured. This is a space where we as parents can, as long as you have the time to allow them, to really experiment, have fun with their learning, have fun with play. But then also, quite honestly, I feel like I've been doing this a lot as a parent right now, is allowing them to have that time and freedom to, quite honestly, get a little bored, go off and explore with their blocks or their toys, whatever it is, for longer than they normally would on their own, and really see what they can explore, what they can create. Their imagination is amazing at this age. The other thing is, I think just language, talking, and books are your best friend in this case. And so that's as not a pre-K teacher or, oh, sorry, there she is. But really just would encourage to think about it, not from the school day lens for some of our youngest learners, and how they can just really learn from play and what is around them. And obviously screen time is going to be more than it ever is for our youngest learners, and that's okay if that's how we're engaging that way, but just being really mindful about what the quality of that screen time is.
Thank you so much.
Is that the Department of Early Care and Learning would endorse what I said.
And I did add a link to their coronavirus resource page in the chat. And Katie, we saw her flash by the screen behind you. That was so cute. So this one is for Jewel and Ray, but anyone can jump in here. I just want to ask about the suggestions as it comes to trying to reduce the chaos of distance learning and balancing that with workloads for parents who will be in the home as their children are learning during the same time. So what are some of your recommendations, Ray and Jewel and anyone else, to help balance the chaos that is certain to come because of distance learning and work requirements?
So I have to highlight the importance of self-care. We are, I think we've heard this term unprecedented so much now this entire year. It's probably the most used word, I feel like, during this crisis. But the idea, we think about if you're flying a plane, right? And they tell you every single time to make sure that you put your oxygen mask on first before assisting others with it, including your children, right? Because you can't give what you don't have. And right now, our children are little sponges, no matter what age they are. They are watching you, they are modeling you, they are absorbing everything from you. So it's really being able to mind myself, being kind to myself, being kind as a parent to yourselves, and recognize you are human. And I know a parent is a superpower. It is only in spirit, right? Because you have to recharge, with everything else. You have to shut down. You have to implement those very healthy self-care strategies, maintaining a good sleep routine, digital detox. You have to get off of line, just like we want for our kids. We have to disconnect. So I just learned about this digital well-being on cell phones. And if I'm late, I'm sorry, guys, but this is just something I just learned, where you can actually put a timer on how long you are on an app. So my is playing little games, Sugar Rush. It just makes me happy, right? But I could probably spend way too much time on it and not being able to do other things, which means it disrupts my own structure. It disrupts my own organization. And it's that excessive screen time that's not good for me overall. Really doing things more intentionally to support your own well-being. When you're able to implement that, I just also encourage show your children you being human. It doesn't mean you want to break down and have an adult temper tantrum, because sometimes we can do that. But the idea, though, is showing them that sometimes it does get hard. Sometimes we are facing challenges. It doesn't mean that we shut down. It just means that we're human and we have feelings and we can acknowledge those feelings. It doesn't mean to cry or have outbursts every single time, but it's also normalizing that if you do, then that's what needs to happen in the moment. But it's always about that resilience. Building for our children is so important, and it starts with modeling. Basically, how do we show our children we can bounce back? When things are getting hard, how can we explain to them what our mental health is, and then taking steps towards that, letting them know that, I don't have the answers. We don't have to pretend like we know. And sometimes we give children that false, interpretation that we have it all together. And it also creates its own chaos for them. So it's really about, particularly, and just a touch point on Katie's statement, when we're working with our younger children, helping them to recognize their own emotions, right? So making those I statements, when they're starting to break down and their emotions are starting to get overwhelming, talk to me about how you are feeling so we can get that out and then we can move past it. And then I have to just, resound on Maribel. It is so important to create structure. Structure is not only good for you as a parent and a caregiver, but it is so helpful and encouraging and empowering for our young people at any age. And I know you have our teenagers who will against you at any point, but I promise you it's difficult for them more when they do not have the structure in place. Really recognizing that unstructured free time is also important. So when you're having class all day, or you're in distance learning, make time for family. Have a intentional, mindful meal. These are mindful activities that you can engage in. Have them teach or cook with you, just showing some level of engagement. Because have you noticed that the longer we're in our house, the more separate we seem to be from others, because we're so focused on just trying to get whatever we need to get done. So being intentional about connecting, and not just the, hey, how are you? How did your school go? Really having intentional conversations and helping them to open up about how they're feeling, because unfortunately at this age, that's when they are unable to process the emotions that they are feeling. And if they're hitting puberty, well, that's a whole nother conversation, right? So it's really about bringing it all to normalizing how they are feeling, normalizing that this is chaotic and can be difficult to manage, helping them to learn different structure techniques, teaching your kids how to study, teaching them how to organize themselves, helping them to understand that, you can't talk to your friends all day and sit at a computer all day. It's not productive. You don't in a classroom, right? So being able to model the same behavior that you would do in the classroom, and hopefully it's good, right? Over desk, but really helping to have those conversations with them and creating that structure. And, again, another statement Maribel talked about is talking. Don't be afraid to communicate with your children. Communicate what's going on, communicate routines, communicate changes. And, again, there is a level of too much information. And I explain, because I'm a therapist, right, by nature. So of course I talk a lot, which they get tired of, but I at least encourage them. It's like, as long as you're listening, I just want to make sure you understand some of the things. Sometimes when kids have a reason for why they're doing what they're doing, it's a little easier to digest. So really taking those aspects of that self-care and then demonstrating it for your own children on how they can practice self-care, how they can be more mindful and present and focused. Because you can't change a lot of what's happening. I'm so sorry. Mask mandates are happening, right? I'm so sorry. You can't go and hang out your friends in the classroom. And it is to validate it. It does. It sucks all day. It really does. I hate that I can't be with my friends either. It's validating their emotions, but then also letting them know, but this isn't the end, right? We keep going. We keep pushing through. We keep finding innovative ways to connect. If you have to wake up talking to your friends, if that makes you feel good, that's great. So encouraging parents, pick your battles. Not everything requires a back and forth. Trust me, it's exhausting, and you will just figure out, maybe you don't have to put the dishes up today. Or maybe, if you need to live in your junkie room, you only got about, 2 more days that I can take it. But giving them that space allowing them to make better decisions. All of those are good techniques to increase that resiliency for our students, for our children, that level of organization for your child, for your family, maintaining connectivity outside of the school system, outside of your immediate family, having calls to have better ways to connect, and just empowering them ongoing. I think when you see that your kids are healthy and they're thriving, it in turns creates a better sense of empowerment for parents. And sometimes we need just a little bit of that. And then I'll just be kind to yourselves. I encourage that more than anything. Some days it's just not going to be a good day, you know, and then some days I think I saw a meme that says, you know, today I just want to go today. I just want to eat all day and headbutt people. That will make me happy. So if you need to be a goat for the day, be a goat, you know, don't be a goat, guys, but really finding ways to have comfort in yourself and recognizing your own well-being should be a priority, right?
Thank you, Jewel. And be a GOAT, greatest of all times. Be a GOAT. Ray, did you want to contribute anything to that one?
Yeah, I can add just a little. I think Jewel kind of hit it all on the head right there. I think most of us have touched on structure. I think structure is absolutely important. However, I would caution, and this is just something I learned when the pandemic first started, you know, I'm all about structure, and my daughter can tell you about that. And so initially when it started, I set up a study space. Here's where we're going to do our virtual learning. It didn't work for her. And I think we have to be flexible, communicate with your kids, as Jewel was saying, learn what works for them, give them an opportunity to try it their way, see how it works. And, you know, you may be able to let them run with it, or you may have to compromise on something in the middle. I think it's also important that we stay connected with their education. Especially if you have an older child and you have an older child that is really good about taking care of business. We can sometimes kind of just let them float out there and do it on their own. But we need to make sure we're connected. You know, what are you learning about? Extrapolate that into some real world situations when we're watching TV. Hey, this is World War II that you were learning about. Look at this video here. Or, you know, you just have to still make those connections and be involved. But again, you have to understand that this is a different environment. They may not want you to make those connections every day. I had to fall back a little bit and just ask weekly questions because it seems like I was overwhelming my child. She gets out of virtual learning. Okay, sit here. What did we learn about? Oh, that's great. And I want to go on. And she's like, I've had enough for the day. So we've got to be flexible. We've got to communicate with our children and try to find that happy space that works for them. It's their education. They have to do the learning. They're doing the most of the hard work there. And I think another important piece is something that we touched on earlier in the conversation. It is going to be frustrating. There are going to be things that we may not like about virtual learning or when we go back with the A/B schedule or whatever we do. But as parents, we have to be careful about how we comment on it because they'll start to take that in and they might take on that same attitude and that's going to hurt them. You know, we as adults, we've completed that high school process or that middle school process. It's not going to impact us too much. But if you have a bad attitude about a class for some particular reason that dad keeps ranting about, it probably will bleed into how you perform and interact in that class. So I just think being flexible with the structure, connecting with the children, allowing them to have some input on how they go about their daily routine, and then being very careful about our comments about the process and just kind of try to limit what you talk about with them, wait till they're in bed and you know, discuss it later, your frustrations.
Thank you, Ray. And to that note on flexibility, hopefully those districts that are providing direct instruction in real time record and make that available to those students who may not have the same level of access for others. So I just wanted to throw that out there to all of the district personnel listening in.
So our next question is probably for Kamala, and then maybe Ray and Maribel would want to chime in too. And it's kind of a two-part question. The first is whether schools will be offering non-technology based options for parents and children who aren't able to engage in virtual learning for whatever reason. And kind of along with that, if there's a parent of younger children who feels like the child might be needing some extra help academically, sort of what are your recommendations for them? So both if somebody says virtual learning is not going to happen for us, period, Is there alternatives they can ask for? And then also if children need sort of extra help academically, what's the best route for those parents and guardians to take?
So there will be some of that, right? And so one of the things that we're doing is we're being very intentional about making sure that we're connecting with families, that they have everything that they need. Not every kid does well with virtual and technology. Some kids just really do need to have face-to-face learning. And so, you know, all kids are different and all of them need different things. So what I would say is that there are people there that educators are the experts in education. If something's not working for your child, it's critical that you let us know that. And it's critical for you to share what the frustrations are and then allow us to work with you to figure out what it is that we need to do. What do we need to readjust? Who can we bring in to help figure this out for you? So, I mean, again, really communication is going to be key in all of this, you know. So when you're at home and you're seeing that maybe your child is getting frustrated, or you're going to be able to tell that there are certain parts of your student's day that just aren't working for them. You know, we're human. I work best first thing in the morning. By 2 o'clock, I'm like, oh my gosh, right? And so kids are no different. We just really need to be watchful, well, you know, be intentional about how we proceed with what their needs are. Let them know that it's okay not to be okay sometimes, and we're not going to be great all the time, and you know, celebrate their successes. But certainly, again, I can't stress how much communication is going to be a huge part of this. You're not in this alone, and we only know what we can do for you if we know what we need to do for you. So I would say communication is key. Don't be scared to say that whatever the teacher is doing isn't working for that kid. And that's okay. Not everything's going to be okay for every single child, right? So communication, a watchful eye. It's okay not to be okay. And know that there are people out there ready. We are excited to help. We want to help. And there are resources out there. And so whatever you see pops up, just let us know and let us help you, you know?
And I would just add that I have seen that in the works. Last year, at the tail end of the year, I had several students that were not able to log on or didn't have a device, and the school systems were able to, or the individual schools were able to either, you know, mail that work to them, a packet of work, or they were able to pick it up at school, given a certain amount of time, and they bring it back. It's exactly like Maribel said. I think, you know, and I've worked with schools in Fulton, Gwinnett, DeKalb, and APS. The schools are really understanding at this point. I don't think they have any choice but to be understanding. So if you let the schools know what the issue is, they will try to work with you. I've even had some cases that I just really thought it was great. I mean, I had a special education student that I was working with who didn't have access to technology, and the teacher didn't just send the packets. She sent the packet, but then she would visit the home once a week and bring her technology, and they would work through it. I mean, we're really seeing amazing things from teachers in schools. So if you let them know, they will provide you with what you need.
And I would love to add on to that real quickly, is going on to what Maribel said about, you know, partnerships earlier, is that parents nor schools have to do this on their own in this space. There's also the community-based providers who are playing a big role in this as well, where we're seeing, you know, whether it's, again, in person or virtual, a lot of the community-based providers are coming in and working closely with the schools to supplement what schools and teachers are doing, and doing some of that one-on-one, you know, little tutoring in the off times of that virtual class to really supplement for those learners who might need additional support. And they've also oftentimes leveraged their community spaces as a Wi-Fi center for families who might need better connectivity and more access technology. So I just encourage everyone to be thinking also around who else. I mean, yes, of course, reach out to your schools, reach out to your teachers, but then who else is there that is there and ready to support? Schools often know who those partners are, but you as families and parents and communities know who those partners are as well. So make sure you're reaching out to all those different players.
Takes a village, for real.
And there are a lot of parents who have started to create, there's learning pods. One, I want you to connect parents who already do homeschooling, right? Because they already have the tactics in place, they have the program that could probably help with some of that additional structuring. But if you are indeed in need of additional resources, absolutely start off with those community partners, but also looking at those parents. And even for my parents who have their own social anxiety, right, and trying to connect with other parents, we that play date, because that means we have to connect to the parent, right? But it's also an opportunity to start building your social support. One of the things that is so important right now is having available supports in your area, in your community, knowing who you can trust on. And now is one of the times that we do need to find those links. And I caution you, of course, safety of your child, making sure that you are making smart choices, connecting with Facebook groups and mom groups, and realizing the safety of some of the areas. But when you are limited in resources, don't forget that the village extends outside of professionals too. There are some of those who are just willing to hang in there, particularly for those who have special need children, or those with disabilities that connected parents with that. Sometimes that is community that you can connect with and get more to get that additional support. We recognize schools are doing so much, but there's only so much they can get done. So how can we come together as parents, and recognizing that this isn't easy, and being kind? You know, I stress that enough because I just see so kindness happening right now, and that kindness is hurtful for our mental health, you know, when we're just trying to do the best for our families. So just thinking that is, how can you build your support system so you can be stronger and supported as a parent and not get so overwhelmed.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that's been said. And I just want to acknowledge that there are districts in the state, particularly in the rural areas outside of the metro Atlanta area, that are not as well resourced, and may not be as receptive to communication from parents, or may simply not have practically the resources to be able to meet those needs. And in that case, I think community-driven advocacy and building solidarity within a community, as Jill said, outside of professionals, is the most powerful thing that can possibly be done, because it will push for the really incredible and innovative things that is happening in the metro districts.
Thank you, Kamala. And I want to stay with you for a minute and Ray chime in as well. What should the parents and guardians of students with IEPs, 504 plans, or any support plans that are in place, what can they expect from the fall, and what are their rights as we enter into this virtual or remote learning dynamic? What are their rights at this moment?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to know is probably that all students with disabilities are entitled to a free and appropriate public education that will allow them to make progress, whether they're in a school building or not. So if you're a parent of a student with a disability and you don't feel comfortable sending them to school, and you're given that choice, or your school district is entirely remote, they are still entitled to receive all of the supports and services and interventions that they need to be able to succeed. That's the legal directive. Obviously, that's a lot harder in the real world, and it can create a huge burden on parents. But the simple answer is legally that school districts have an obligation to make sure that students have everything they need to make progress. And I would really encourage families to work collaboratively with their schools to come up with solutions that practically actually work for their families. I think that there can be some shame or reluctance to be as communicative as possible in this moment, because it is really hard. It's a lot harder if you're a parent of a child with a disability. It's a lot harder if you're a working parent of multiple children with disabilities. And it's especially hard if you don't have the time or money or resources to be able to connect with all of the services that would benefit your student. And I certainly have clients who have felt that and have experienced that shame. I really encourage parents to open up to their child's school, because your school has a legal obligation, but also most likely actually wants to fulfill that obligation, and can't without you being open to that. I will say, just like throwing out a couple of examples, I've had with a client I've worked with a parent who had this luxury. Like, I had great success having the student special education teacher train the parent in implementing certain elements of that student's IEP, and even working with the parent to sort of build a space in her house that echoed the student space in the school. And the school district was incredibly supportive in working through that, and we got a whole lot of incredible resources from the student special education teacher and the special education director in that district. Last, I just want to note that there are some things that might not be practically possible in this moment. Like, if your child needs hand over hand or in-person physical therapy, and that's just like not something that can be done right now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's just a total loss for your child. School districts have been, all of the school districts I've worked in have been having individual IEP meetings to assess what kind of compensatory services are needed for students with disabilities, and to look at what they've lost in this moment, or in this time that hasn't been able to be implemented from a distance. And that's a part of a process that you, the parent, should be involved in and should be included in. And if there are things that, needs that you feel are not being met, again, keep documents, continue to communicate, because even if something can't happen right now, that doesn't mean that it can't happen in the future. And in fact, it legally should happen in the future.
Right. So I would agree with Kamala. Their rights stay intact. So students with disabilities have the same rights they did as pre-COVID. And, you know, in terms of the accommodations and everything that they have to receive, as Kamala was mentioning, some of it may be impractical to deliver, but much of it can very well be described to the parents through modeling. It can help them, you know, implement some of those same interventions, some of those same accommodations at home. As well as, you know, if there's, let's say, for example, if you have a student with a disability that needs adaptive technology, you can make requests for that stuff to be, you know, available to the student at home. Again, the IEP and understanding the IEP is going to be really important here. So I would say to parents, if you have a student with an IEP, now is the time for you to try to understand what's in it. And that if you have to go to someone at the school or someone outside of the school to help you understand what's there, because in order for you to ask for help, you need to know what is my child supposed to be getting? What services does he or she get while she's in school? And once you understand that, then the modeling makes more sense. Or then the resources that may be available to you elsewhere, you can apply them to your situation. So I would say first and foremost, if you are the parent of a student with a disability, make sure you understand that IEP. And I understand that parents may not understand that IEP. Call someone, establish a rapport with someone in the school, a counselor, an assistant principal, and let them know that, hey, my child has an IEP, I need to understand it. And from there, these accommodations, these interventions, these services that they're provided, how can I do them at home? And I've seen where, like, for example, you would think speech and language pathologist, you know, that's a person that actually usually works with the student one-on-one. Perhaps we're thinking it's impractical because they can't get to the home, but they may be able to share strategies that they use when they're working with that student one-on-one that you could try to implement on your own. Again, the meetings, they're required by law. I've seen those happening. I've been a part of those happening virtually or telephonically, and they have gone on just fine. And so these mandatory meetings, these mandatory services, interventions that your child should be getting, they should still receive during the pandemic. I will say, though, that the onus is, it's always on the parent to make sure that their child is getting what they're supposed to be getting, but even more so now. Not to say that the school is trying not to give them what they deserve, but there's so much going on that I can imagine certain cases fall through the cracks. I didn't have any IEP meetings that didn't get heard as they were supposed to, but I did have some extended school year stuff that kind of fell through the cracks. The parent was expecting a call, didn't get a call, extended school year starts. They were expecting to be getting services and they weren't. And then, you know, if you reach out to organizations like the Truancy Intervention Project and others at Georgia Appleseed, and we can help you go forward if that happens to you as well.
So along those lines, I want to share something. A pad and a pen. As a parent and working on the school, whether it's a special ed child or not, you've got to have your school supplies too. You won't be talking to the teacher every day. You won't be sending an email every day. What you want to do is to write down what works, what doesn't work. And it's really simple. Date, comment, who did you call if you're doing follow-up? Because it may take a week or two before you have some conversation. I certainly couldn't remember that. So I just wanted to give that little tip of make sure you've got your school supplies and your structure so that you're remembering what you're doing and you're able to do the best. And write down the good stuff too. Here's a structure that needs a gap, and here's where it worked really well. Celebrate it and make sure that's going to be your guidepost too. As you work with the school, as you work with the teachers, as you work with the counselors to make it the best possible school year for your child.
Thank you, Caroline. And just really quickly, for those parents who may experience job loss or displacement because you have to be home with your children, please reach out to the social worker at your child's school. They may know of resources. There are a lot of community organizations that have funds to help. So please connect with your school social worker or counselor just to see what's out there and know that you're not alone in this.
Great. So another question we've gotten, and I'm going to make this a jump ball and see who knows, if anybody knows. How will schools be monitoring and reporting attendance this year? And I think going along with that is, of course, are there going to be penalties for non-attendance, and what are those penalties or processes kind of going to look like?
Yeah, so yeah, of course. So those it's a hot topic. It's something that, you know, it needs to be worked through. I can say for Fulton, we're in the process of working within trying to get metrics and recommendations from the state level to see what that looks like. And so I would say stay tuned to that. Those conversations are being had right now.
That's great. Thank you. And obviously at TIP, where I work, this is something that we're paying a lot of attention to also. And I think, Maribel, I liked what you said about Fulton County schools are looking at kids who were unengaged in the spring and making that a priority, because I think the approach that we have always taken, and that I think in this virtual environment is going to be so much more important, is that non-attendance and non-engagement is a sign that something's going on. So we don't need to take a punitive approach to that. We need to say, what's going on? How can we help? How can we reach you? How can we get the child engaged in school? You know, what are kids kind of needing so that we can bridge this gap and get folks involved? So another question, and I think this probably will also be kind of for everyone. What resources are you all aware of that are specifically available for undocumented families or mixed status families in the community? And are there any concerns sort of specific to undocumented families or resources available to undocumented families?
I mean, I guess this is a personal thing. Students are our students. So we're gonna do whatever we need to do to get our students what they need. So I don't think that for us, the resources look any different other than that. If they need something, we're gonna find a way to get it. So.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all so much. And this is for Jewel and Katie, but again, anyone feel free to jump in on this. So we know that families rely on schools for much more than education. Sometimes it's meals, sometimes it's counseling services or behavioral health supports, aftercare or other wraparound services. When school is not in session or in person, what are local organizations doing to bridge those gaps and support families when they're not in the school building? We talked about it a little earlier, but if we can just expound on that a bit more so folks out there can know what's near and what's in the community to help out.
I want to jump back to the previous question very quickly because I did a quick little look. The Latin Community Fund, going back to the question of resources on that last question, the Latin Community Fund has some remarkable resources. They're a place to contact, to engage, check their webpage, and that might provide some of what the parents of undocumented and mixed documented children might have.
And I guess to just jump to your next question, LaShonda, I think it's I don't know, now I'm thinking about the question we just answered. Sorry, Caroline. Katie, I'm gonna throw it off to you and then we're gonna come back to Jewel. That
works, Jewel. Yeah, I think I touched on this a little bit earlier with the after school, the community-based organizations that are out there. I will just say, similar to how schools are figuring this out all right now, these programs, they are out there and they are looking to readjust their models however they can to best meet family and student needs, but just give them a second. A lot of them are working through these plans. I mean, schools that have released their virtual plans, that happened within the last week and a half. And so a lot of these programs are trying to figure out exactly what that looks like for them. But a couple things that I expect that you will see, also just looking at lessons learned and models that we saw this summer and this spring is, I know for a fact there will be programs that are shifting their after school model to be full day in-person programming, as I mentioned earlier, to help connect kids to distance learning who need to, either because their parents are in person in a workplace or for connectivity. But then we're also seeing some innovative models around how we are really, going on, and Jewel can probably talk more about this piece, but checking in on the mental well-being of young people and supporting what the schools are also doing. We've seen some mentoring and after-school program organizations who are really taking their work to a different kind of case management level than it has been in the past. And then these programs that are also working specifically with the schools themselves who are helping to relay that information. A lot of these programs have a good pulse on where the young people are and how they're feeling right now because they've been working with them all summer. So that's another piece there. Meals is a big thing, of course. And then I think that, even just little things that the programs are doing. We saw a lot of really fantastic virtual field trips this summer. I expect that will extend, and they were formal field trips to actual museums across the world who are hosting, but then also just professionals themselves hosting a field trip to their barn that they have in their yard. We also heard of one professional after school provider who they had a dentist appointment and they work with young people. They actually took their phone to the dentist. They recorded some of it, Facebook Lived it, had an interview with the hygienist, and it was a rural community where they don't always have the access to one-on-one communication with medical professionals and actually getting to have those conversations. So I think it really just ranges. But I will say specifically to those parents, working parents who need a space for their young people to go, that's the piece where I will say, I know you kind of need it now, but give it 1 second because programs are quickly flipping their models. They're working with school districts. We are working with school districts as well to help to try to get, it will not be comprehensive, but a rudimentary list of some of these programs across the state who will be providing in-person care during school day hours. That is not up yet, but we will have that in the coming week or so on our website. And then also always have to recommend going to Quality Care for Children. Often people usually think about them only for referrals for childcare for our youngest 0 to 5 population, but they also do referrals for summer camps and after school. So that will also include this time. But again, this model, it's tricky to kind of capture right now because it hasn't been a model that's existed in the past because, Jewel, this is unprecedented times. And so these are a new model for this field. So give them a minute. Programs are figuring it out, but we'll try to help to connect you to those programs that are out there.
I just want to jump in and say, hey, so we do Fulton First Day. which is a great resource. You can sign up for it online on our school district public portal. And we are still giving out supplies, and there's lots of community partnerships that are coming together to give out food, school supplies. It'll be kind of like a sign up drive through type of thing where they'll put it right in your trunk. So that's available. And I want to give a plug to all the community agencies that have reached out to the schools to make sure that because we're connected to the kids, that what services they had to provide and to help us with. And so they've even jumped in and filled the gap when it came to meals and lots of other things, tutoring. And so I feel like everybody is coming together. But yes, I do want to say that if you're a Fulton student, if you jump on our site, you can sign up there. There are lots of community partners that are going to be there that day giving away resources, advice on information that you might need, as well as school supplies.